Hello, my name is Olivia, or Liv, as the YouTube channel name suggests. Doesn't really matter to me. And today I want to talk about a very popular series that I happen to really love, and that is the Twilight saga. I am currently wearing my Twilight shirt in honor of it, and I'm sitting by my little Twilight shelf, and I actually thought that in honor of this, I would put on my sparkly Edward lip gloss. They do sell this at Hot Topic. It's not the world's best quality lip gloss, but it's still pretty fun, and I felt that it was fitting for this occasion. So I know that a million people have made videos talking about and dissecting Twilight, and the reason that I decided to make mine was because I think that I want to talk about the ways that you can enjoy and love a story and love a piece of media like books and movies, and also critique them, and also find the areas where they are a bit problematic and maybe not the best, but also still find it in you to enjoy the entertaining aspects of it. Because that is very much me when it comes to this saga. So my big disclaimer that I always try and make before I spew my opinions on anything is that these are all of my opinions. This is all my analysis. This is all coming straight from my brain. I am not a book or movie critic. This is just the way that I feel. These are all my feelings. So if you disagree, that's actually great. Feel free to tell me what you agree or disagree with. I'm completely open to polite discussion about all of this, because like I said, it's all coming from my noggin. It's just spewing the thoughts and feelings. I do have notes though, because I didn't want to just start being like, Twilight's problematic without having a train of thought written out. So I do have notes, but yeah. I'm actually going to film this video in two halves. I'm going to film this part, where I'm going to be talking about Twilight and New Moon, and then the second part is going to be Eclipse and Breaking Dawn. And I'm also going to be combining kind of Twilight and Midnight Sun together, since they're technically the same time period in the saga. So just letting you know that. I do want to talk about the series as a whole for just a minute. I do find it to be very problematic. I think there are a lot of issues in the series. I think that it gives some really toxic examples of relationships, and not just romantically. I mean, with your friends and family as well. And also just poor examples of decision making overall. A lot of these characters are very flawed, and I feel like their flaws aren't critiqued throughout the novels in the way that they should have been, if that makes any sense. When something like this becomes so huge and so insanely popular and people become really obsessed with it, that's when it becomes influential. And so when something is really problematic but also really influential, I think you can see where that, could be an issue. So, yeah. The big things that I think I should say off the bat that are just clear. Stephenie Meyer is racist. She literally admits and states very clearly in the handbook, which I have not read, but I've seen it, where she literally says that vampires do not have any pigment in their skin. And she doesn't give any reasoning for that. It just happens. When they turn into vampires, they just lose all of their color. And so they just become white. And that's very damaging, because it is clearly for aesthetic purposes, which is not great. So that's not fun. And also her portrayal of her native characters is a little bit rocky. I'm not super educated on that, but I have heard people discussing that aspect of her writing. So yeah, it's not great. It's not good overall. And it's just what it is. And also, Stephenie Meyer is also a little bit misogynistic, and I think that will become very clear as I discuss everything. I think that you'll really see those aspects play a big role in a lot of these characters and storylines. So yeah, but that definitely is something that is kind of self-explanatory, and you'll see as I go. So first, I want to talk about Twilight / Midnight Sun. This is the first installment to the Twilight saga, and it is where Isabella Swan first moves into Forks. So we have the book and the movie in Bella's perspective, and then Midnight Sun in Edward's perspective. I'm actually really, really glad that she wrote Midnight Sun and added the entire story, or the first part of the story, from Edward's perspective. I think that it was really, really cool, and I think I kind of like it more than Bella's perspective, but I also kind of hate it at the same time. I'll explain more, but it's kind of bittersweet to me. It's hard to explain. Anyway, so for starters, movie book comparison. I'm just going to give a brief little movie book comparison for each part. I actually really, really love the movie Twilight. I like it more than the book a lot. I think that it adds such a sensory aspect to it with the cinematography and the coloring and, the characters, the actors, and the music. Both Twilight and New Moon have incredible soundtracks, and so I think that all of that together makes it much more memorable and aesthetically pleasing and just enjoying to watch. I don't think I would enjoy the saga nearly as much if that first movie hadn't been it was just done in such a cool way. And I've watched videos of Catherine Hardwicke talking about her making of that movie. She was the director, and I really, really wish that Catherine Hardwicke had directed all the movies, because I think she would have taken a really, really creative and awesome turn with everything. She gave us a beautiful, incredible first movie, and I guess I can't really complain. So if we're going chronologically, Bella comes to Forks because her mom wants to go on the road with her stepdad, who's a minor league baseball player, and she's like, okay, I'll let you do your thing, but I'm a teenager who goes to school, so I need to be in one place, so I'm just going to go live with my dad in Forks. She makes this choice, and then proceeds to complain about it nonstop. She comes to Forks and she is pissed. She is very unhappy about it. And she's just so mad that she's in Forks, and almost behaves and thinks as if somebody had forced her to go there, like as if somebody put a gun to her head and shoved her in there, which just isn't true. So I find it really interesting how whiny she is about it. But I find that Bella does this a lot, where she sacrifices herself for others, and then she doesn't really regret it, but she just wallows in this self-pity about it as if it was inevitable, when really she could have just thought about herself for once. And so it just kind of annoys me to watch her constantly make decisions that she's going to hate later, but she's never going to outright say that she wish she hadn't done it. I don't know. It's weird. And another part of that annoys me is that in Midnight Sun, Edward just swoons over her selflessness like it's the best, most amazing character trait of all time, which I think is interesting because I really feel like it isn't a bad thing to think about yourself sometimes. And I don't think that putting other people before you is always the right thing to do. I think sometimes your well-being and happiness is important. And I feel like throughout Twilight, there's very little of that. And there's a lot of self-sacrifice and a lot of emphasis on putting other people before yourself. And I don't know if I like that very much, but going on. So she's pissed. And she's complaining about Forks nonstop. And she literally complains about how it's too pretty. She literally is whining about how there's too much green, there's too many trees, it's too luscious. And I'm just like, okay, you know what, Bella? Let's trade. I'll go to Forks. I'll go to Washington. I would love to see the mountains and the trees and all of this annoying, luscious green that is just so obnoxious to you. I hate that. I literally hated that so much because I really want to visit Washington. And then she goes to school. And this is another part that really, really annoys me because it's not necessarily that she acts annoying. It's her inner monologue in this book. Before anything has even happened with Edward, she's already hating everyone, hating everything, and acting like this is the worst place on the planet. There is literally a line, and this line literally made my jaw drop when I read it. And it's during the part where Jessica is introducing her to all of the people at their lunch table, being nice, being friendly, being welcoming. And Bella literally says in the book, I forgot all their names as soon as she said them, which is just, what a hateful thing to say. Like, there's so much anger and dismissal of everyone. And I don't like that. I hate her attitude a lot. I just don't get this kind of victim persona that Bella puts on at the beginning. She's literally just mad already. She's just upset already for some reason. But this is really my least favorite part of Bella's dialogue, is the very beginning of the first book is when I think Bella is the most insufferable, like just to hear the things that she's thinking, because I just can't believe how horribly draining her personality is at the beginning, but she does get less like that. So the rest of her thoughts are just kind of normal and kind of boring, but at the beginning I was like, I was just shocked. I was like, how does anybody like the book more? Like, this girl seems horrible, but it does get a little bit more tame. So then we get into the first interactions with Edward, and I have a lot of feelings about her first interactions with Edward, but some of those feelings include is Bella supposed to be this intelligent, smart, well-rounded character when she literally does not care at all that he is the weirdest human being she has ever met, or human being in her mind. She is just like, he does so many concerning things. The way he acts when he first meets her, the way his eyes be changing colors, he saves her from a van, like, all of those things should terrify her. And to an extent they do, but not in the way that they should. And the fact that she does not tell a single soul is mind-blowing. Maybe she's just book smart, not street smart, that's for sure. And definitely not emotionally smart. That's without a doubt. There is one thing that I really do like about the books more than the movie, and that is the development of Edward and Bella's friendship. In the movie, because there is limited time, it kind of feels like it goes from 0 to 100. I think I've heard people complain that, like, they fall in love too fast, and I think that's because in the book, there's a pretty drawn-out section where they hang out, and they sit together at lunch, and they talk, and they laugh, and they have inside jokes, and it's very lighthearted and pleasant between them. In the movies, it seems like their only bonding is just from the crazy things that are happening to them. But in the book, they actually bond as people just by getting to know each other. So that, I think, if you've never read the books, is important to know, because they do actually get along. It's not just, he's sparkly and she loves him. Like, there's so much more. I just want to touch on the school atmosphere for just a second. I want to talk about her friends. And it's this instant misogyny that, like, hops into the story, starting with girls like Jessica and what was her name? I think it was Lauren. Jessica and Lauren. Lauren is not in the movies, by the way. I think Jessica and Lauren are kind of combined as a character. I feel like because they're just like regular feminine girls, they're like supposed to be some kinds of villains, which always kind of annoyed me. And then when we get our first description of Rosalie, she's described as just insanely beautiful and feminine and blonde and just like, you know, a very, very, very beautiful person, because she's a vampire and she's like supposed to be extra beautiful, I guess. And then, of course, Rosalie turns out to be somebody who we're supposed to not like and think of as, like, you know, kind of bitchy and calculating and just not kind. And I really feel like Stephenie Meyer draws a lot of parallels to being feminine and pretty to being bad and annoying, which I really, really hate. and it's such a common theme throughout the entire saga, and it just absolutely drives me up the wall. I can't stand that. It's not very nice. So then we get to prom, where Bella tags along because she wants to go to a bookstore, but Jessica and Angela want to try on prom dresses. Ugh. Actually, Angela is a really great character in both the movies and the books. I love Angela. She's great, but they're trying on prom dresses. Ugh, but Bella really wants to go to this bookstore. And I also find it interesting because in the movies, Bella actually gets the book, but in the novel, Bella never even actually gets the book that she's looking for. So Bella almost gets attacked by a bunch of creepy dudes. Well, she does get attacked, kind of. But Edward saves the day, of course, because he's stalking her, which we'll get into. So they go to the restaurant where her friends decided to just go and eat instead of looking for their friend who is all alone in an unfamiliar area. But they were like, we'll just sit down and eat. She'll find her way. Look, if you're out with your friends and one of them is missing and not with you, and she said she was going to be with you, be concerned. Go looking for her. Call someone. Do something. So she goes there with Edward for a slightly nice and slightly awkward dinner. And she confirms that he can read minds. And she's like, cool. Sounds about right. Which I guess in the grand scheme of things, after everything that she's seen with him, I guess the reading minds thing kind of makes sense. But she's still just a little too chill about it. I mean, I feel like that's the kind of thing that you should hear and be like really, really freaked out. But she just kind of seems nonchalant. She kind of just seems unbothered. And I feel like there should be a lot of feelings, but it's not really a whole lot of that. So yeah, after that, the story, I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, she finds out he's a vampire, still doesn't really care for some reason, and then just continues to pursue him. And it's really annoying and really stupid. Her lack of emotion about the whole thing is really frustrating to read because I just don't get it. Like, it's from her point of view, but I still don't feel like I understand what's going on inside of her head. Like, it is just, I'm like, what are you doing? What is happening? How are you justifying this as something that is normal or okay? It's not. She continues to pursue him. Edward lets it happen, of course, because he's irresponsible, and things go wrong. Shocker. But I do find that this is probably the least problematic book, because things just get worse and worse as the saga progresses. But I think that this is actually the least problematic because, I mean, it's just a story about a girl who meets a vampire, they fall in love, crazy vampire things happen. Like, there's not as much family dynamic or love triangles or friendships ruined. Like, there's not nearly as much of those other outside aspects. I mean, there is, but we'll get into that too. So I guess this all sets the scene in a way that will be much more explored later, in where Bella just blindly loves Edward and does not question or consider their relationship or his existence at all. Literally at all. There's just no logic. There is no logic behind Bella's eyes. Like, she doesn't even try to justify their relationship. She just acts like it's normal, like it's obvious. She's like, well, duh, I'm gonna date you. Like, she's not even trying to come up with excuses for herself because she doesn't even think it's worth excusing. That blows my mind, and I think it's just a really, really bad example of how to handle somebody who you are really attracted to but is also very dangerous and bad for you, because that happens in life. And maybe you're not meeting any vampires in your life, but you might be meeting somebody who is potentially not a great person. And I just hate that there's no pushback from her at all. There's none. And She is such a determined character. She's such a stubborn character, but it just goes towards all the wrong things because she could have easily chosen to make Edward earn her trust, love, and commitment. Easy. She could have, not put him in such an easy position. So instead, she just pushes his boundaries and pretty much tries to get him to reciprocate all of her feelings as soon as possible and as intensely as possible, and just pretty much will not give reason the time of day. But then this gets into why I like Edward's point of view a lot better, because, like I said, Bella clearly has a lot of logical issues, like her ability to reason is very dim. I like getting an outward point of view look of her from Edward. I also find it really interesting that Stephenie Meyer created a character who could read minds and then chose to write from the perspective of the character who could not read minds, because it is so cool to hear a character who can read minds. She also created vampires and then chose to write from the perspective of someone who is not a vampire. We get to learn so much more about not just the Cullens, but vampires in general and how they work and where they come from, kind of. We never really get a full explanation. I've also never read the illustrated guide, so maybe she explains the origins of vampires. I wouldn't know. I've never read it. I especially think that a lot of Twilight fans really, really enjoy learning about the lore and the history behind these supernatural creatures like vampires and werewolves, and Bella could just never give us a whole lot of that except for what they were willing to disclose to her. And so it's really, really cool to see it firsthand. I really think that the first book, when it was originally written, would have been so much better if it was written from both perspectives and kind of jumped back and forth a little bit. But then, Edward in general, I think is just a much more interesting character. And that doesn't mean that I think he's a better person or good necessarily, but he's definitely more interesting. Because Bella is kind of plain, and you might hear people complain about that a lot, about how Bella is plain and boring or whatever, and I think that that's just the way that a lot of romance novel characters, like the female lead perspective, is, because it's kind of meant for the reader to see through, to put themselves in that character. And so I think that a lot of times those characters are kind of intentionally plain in that way. But Edward is absolutely not like that at all. He is so interesting. He has so much emotional turmoil and feelings and experiences, and he's dealing with a lot. He's trying to figure out what to do in this super crazy, fascinating predicament that he's in of being this vampire who is constantly at risk of hurting people. He really hates himself. He has a lot of self-deprecation and insecurity. And then he proceeds to fall in love with the human who is quite possibly the most endangered by him. And so it's just a really, really tragic situation, but it's really interesting in that way. And so hearing it from his perspective is so cool, because Bella is so stubborn and knows exactly what she wants from it, and knows that she wants Edward and she's going to get Edward. But Edward is constantly fighting not only his desire to eat her, but his desire to be with her romantically. And those are fighting really strongly. He's like, I need to get away from her. I need to run away from her. But also he feels like he can't, because love is just so strong. It's crazy. And it definitely makes the story come a little bit more alive to hear it from his perspective. But something that is good and bad, and it's probably more good from a criticizing standpoint, but it de-idolizes Edward a lot. It makes him a much more realistic person, because clearly Bella puts him on a pedestal. Clearly Bella lacks a way to properly analyze him as a person. And so it does give you a better view of who he is, but it also makes you realize just how weird and creepy and obsessive he is about Bella. He stalks her in many different ways. For starters, he watches her all day at school, not by looking at her, but by reading other people's minds and looking through their eyes and ears to see what Bella is doing and see what Bella is talking about and hearing about and everything like that. He is like indirectly watching her through his supernatural creepy vampire powers. And then he proceeds to start sneaking into her house to watch her while she sleeps. And it's definitely not supposed to be in a creepy way. It's supposed to be in like a endearing, oh, he loves her so much, he likes watching her sleep because she's so beautiful kind of way. But I think majority of us find it to be quite odd. And he's also insanely paranoid about her. Like, he just thinks she's going to die all the time. Not just because of the vampires around her, but because of life. Because she's, like, supposed to be, like, a danger-prone Daphne type character and is supposed to be, like, clumsy and constantly getting herself in predicaments. And he's, like, terrified that some crazy thing is just going to happen and she's going to die. So, to be honest, this Midnight Sun is kind of comical because 90% of the time, Edward is just freaking out and being very dramatic and panicking about what to do. And it's kind of hilarious, but also uncomfortable. But also kind of hilarious. But I also find it interesting because I feel like this is one of the books that has the most not like other girls trope in it. Even though it was written in 2020, you would have thought that Stephenie Meyer would have maybe cut a little bit of that out. But she doesn't. A lot of the book is him admiring how she's different than the other humans and she's better than the other humans, and because she cares about others or doesn't wear makeup. Those are like some of the main things that he talks about. It's weird and I don't like it. I don't know. I feel like books like this kind of, I'll read this directly from my notes because I like the way I worded this. It says, I feel like this story just makes girls feel like they have to force themselves to be less traditionally feminine to be likable and worthy of a cool guy like Edward Cullen. That is damaging and frustrating to read, no matter what. I don't like the fact that so often the media puts down femininity and, you know, the idea of being womanly and enjoying feminine things. There is such a weird stigma around it, which makes me so upset because somebody can be a wonderful person, an intelligent person, a kind person, and still like to dress up and still like to look cute and still like the color pink or whatever, or have blonde hair. I don't know. I do generally think that this book is the least hateable just because it is more so like the build-up, because this story is pretty simple, especially the Bella only version one. It's very simple. The Edward one adds a lot more to it, but luckily I don't think, I mean, other than the like, no, it definitely adds a lot more problems to it, but storyline wise, I do think that it's the least problematic. It's more just a nice, good setup to how things are going to get worse. And, you know, if there is one thing that Stephenie Meyer did very well, is her characters are very consistent. The mistakes that they make in the first books completely follow through till the end. They do the same stupid things over and over again that are just so them. And that's like a good thing from like maybe a writing standpoint, but also a bad thing because some of these characters are just so bad, but they're being painted as being these really good characters. Like the characters that are supposed to be like the good ones are usually the ones that are frustrating me the most, which is weird. I do still like Twilight. I like the cute little vampire romance. I think that it's fun. I think that it's cute. And I also think that it's creative. I think that her depiction of vampires and her lore surrounding vampires is really cool and it's really unique. And it's not like a lot of your traditional vampires, you know. They don't burn from the sun, they sparkle in it. So that's cute. But next we talk about New Moon. So New Moon, quick movie book comparison again. I like this movie, and I think I like it about as much as I like Twilight. I think that this movie also does a good job of taking what it was given and making a good movie out of it. I don't think I like it as much as the first movie. Like I said, I really wish that Catherine Hardwicke had directed all of them, but at least I wish she had directed this one. But it still has great soundtrack, good cinematography. I still really love this movie a lot. So moving into the storyline, I think it's really very important to understand where Bella's mindset is at the beginning of this book. So A, she is extremely in love with and attached to Edward. Because, I mean, it's for a lot of reasons, but most importantly, she is trauma bonded with him very intensely. They have gone through this crazy event together with, James and Victoria and Laurent, who are all very cool characters. She was hunted and almost killed by a vampire, and Edward saved her, and he saved her life. And I think that has just made her attachment to him like 10 times stronger. And B, she's just traumatized in general. I mean, the entire realization that vampires even exist could be enough to traumatize a person plenty, but the entire experience of being hunted and almost killed by one is so much worse. And so you have to think about the kind of trauma that this girl is going through. I mean, just in general, like, she's very fragile and she's very, very attached to the vampire who she's in love with and saved her. And C, she feels certain that Edward is by her side forever. She is sure that he is with her. He's stayed with her. He spent this lovely summer with her. She feels very, very trusting in him. Oh, yeah, and at the beginning of this book, it also introduces this weird fear of aging thing, which is overdone, and there's way too much of an emphasis on it at the beginning of this book. I just don't like how media makes us feel like we're supposed to be like scared of aging, and I know that Bella's situation is a lot different than the average woman, but I think that this situation about the aging definitely could have been touched on because, it is a fear that is unique to her situation. But she acts like aging by 1 year is the end of the world, and no one needed all that drama because it makes it feel like such a bigger deal than it literally ever was. And I don't like that. It was unnecessary. So let's go back to the end of Twilight when Bella is in the hospital. She did all that stupid crap where she said literally the meanest thing she could possibly think of to her dad as an excuse to run away from James, which I don't really think was that necessary. But the way that she treats her father in this book, throughout the entire series, the way that she treats her father throughout this entire series is absolutely absurd. And one of the things that makes me the most mad about Bella. Whatever, she pretends she's breaking up with Edward, that they're fighting, and then boom, she's in the hospital and she loves him again. And can't imagine how confusing that would be from a father's standpoint, but whatever. So Edward's like, okay, so you're gonna go live with your mom after all that, right? And she's like, no, you can't leave me. And so he says that he'll stay with her until she no longer needs him. And he uses that wording specifically to give himself an out in case he decides that he needs to leave her, which is so manipulative because she clearly doesn't pick up on that message. She clearly did not understand that he meant only until you no longer need me. Like, he does not make that clear. But then when he does go to leave her in this book, she's completely blindsided, and he like gaslights her into thinking that he made it obvious that he wasn't going to stay when he didn't. And that is one of the worst things that Edward could have possibly done. Like, look, I understand why Edward left. I do, because obviously he's a danger to Bella, and obviously he wants to keep her safe, especially after everything happened with Jasper on her birthday. It's very personal to him, and he's like, I can't do this anymore. But he just does it in the wrong way. He is so unnecessarily mean. He is cruel to her. He tells her that he doesn't want to be with her. He doesn't want her to come with him. He doesn't want to be a part of her life anymore. Maybe he thought that was going to make her miss him less or something. But that's wrong. It just makes her feel crushed and abandoned and discarded, so much more so than if he had given her closure and if he had been kind and compassionate and comforting. But he wasn't. He just decided to be a jerk and to just push her away harshly. So if you want to break up with somebody, please do not use the Edward method. Really bad idea. really does not work. So then she's depressed and struggling with PTSD. And the Cullens, they don't really care. They don't really care very much. And something that is really annoying is that even in Midnight Sun, Alice has visions of what would happen in multiple versions of the future. And one of those futures that she envisions is Edward leaving her. And she's very depressed, very, very clearly depressed and unwell. And so they already have an inkling of what's going to happen. And yet they don't really make any effort to make sure that she's okay. They just kind of leave without a trace. Edward's the only one who even actually says goodbye, which is stupid. I don't know if Alice gets visions of her being depressed, but if she does, I can't quite remember that specific detail, but if she does get visions of Bella being depressed, is she just not concerned? Like, does she see like night terrors and secluding herself and basically being a shell of a person and just thinks she'll get over it? It's fine. She's grieving. Like, no. There's a severe lack of logic in this saga that really makes me angry. So up to this point, I'm really mad at Edward because he has treated Bella horribly. Because the thing is, Bella is young, she's vulnerable and innocent, and she falls in love with this supernatural vampire charm. And I mean, I don't really think she's that much to blame for it. I feel like it was Edward's responsibility to cut it off early and to not reciprocate those feelings and those actions, and yet he can't find it in himself not to, which I really think it was his job. It fell on him to cut that off when he could, and he doesn't when it's too late, and then he just ends up hurting her really bad. Then we get into the Jacob situation, and this is when the love triangle introduces itself. I love Jacob. Jacob is an absolutely great character, especially in this book. He's someone who is much more suited for Bella. I mean, logically. But clearly this saga is not about logic at all. Literally, it's just not. Like I said, I think she's supposed to have this some kind of otherworldly, magical kind of connection with Edward. And so that's just kind of supposed to be above all else. I guess that's what we have to go off of here. But this magical vampire Edward does leave her. So she leans on Jacob. She's using him partially as a distraction and also partially as a way to hallucinate her ex-boyfriend by putting herself in danger, which is absolutely insane. Just crazy behavior. Yeah, just really, really questioning her sanity here. But I mean, like, I think he's just happy that she's giving him attention, and he doesn't understand her motives at all, so I don't think it really matters to him. And even though I think that it's not very well intentioned on Bella's part, I feel like luckily it's not hurting him, not yet at least. Yeah, Jacob is great. He's a great friend. He's a great guy. He's very loving, and he starts off this book this very innocent, sweet guy, and it just really breaks my heart to watch that sweet, innocent boy kind of go by the end, but whatever. Really, my only complaint about Jacob in this book is that he does kind of try and, I guess, put the moves on Bella pretty fast. I mean, he knows that she's struggling. He knows that, you know, the breakup was really hard on her, and yet he still kind of tries to initiate a bit of a flirtatious, romantic vibe with her, and I just don't really feel like it was the polite thing to do. But also, he's young, he's emotionally immature, and I don't think he or anyone can understand what happened to Bella. So even though it's a little bit immature of him and maybe a little rude of him, I don't really think that that is the most ridiculous thing that has happened so far. I actually think that it's very justifiable. Like, seriously. And, you know, they're both immature. They're teenagers, not 100-year-old teenagers. So something about the saga is that I think that Jacob and Bella were meant to be together, but also Jacob wasn't meant to be a werewolf. once he transitions, it's when I start to feel like I just wish Bella did not have to deal with any supernatural creatures. Like, I wish that she would just, give up on them and just be a human, and then find another human eventually some point in her life, but like maybe just be on her own for a little bit and just detox herself of this insanity. And then, that's when you kind of start to realize that Bella is really putting a lot of herself and her emotions onto boys, onto men. And she has a severe dependence on them to find happiness, to find peace, and to find herself. And I feel like she kind of slowly loses this sense of individuality. It's so damaging. And I feel like it's so much worse because Stephenie Meyer, once again, is like making it seem like it's a fine thing. Like, there's no critique of it. There's no evidence that this isn't supposed to be a good thing. I get really peeved about her dependence on these men, and not only her just general dependence on men, but these insanely dangerous non-human men. It's so romanticizing a dangerous, sexy relationship instead of your safety and your well-being, and that is horrifying. That is absolutely terrifying and not a good thing. Obviously, the dangerous, sexy relationships are cool and they're fun to read about, but you got to think about the fact that that's not an actual good, logical thing, and you can enjoy the story, but just remember that that is not at all applicable to real life, please. But the drama at the end of this book is really good. Like, with everything that happens, Bella decides to jump off a cliff because fun, thrill-seeking Bella is here. I like the whole, the intensity and like the rush, the panic. It's like, we have to go now. We have to save Edward now, blah, blah, blah. But, okay. So, does it make me upset that Rosalie nearly kills her own brother by making it seem like Bella has killed herself? Yes. But I really like Rosalie. And I really like Rosalie because while she is a very, very flawed character, her flaws are very well explored, and her history and her traumas and all of the things that she's gone through do a really good job of showing why she feels the way that she feels, why she does the things that she does. Characters like Edward and Bella keep making decisions that I don't understand, that I don't think are backed up by any kind of reason. The reasoning for 90% of the things that they do is because they're in love, and it's a magical love that is magical and supernatural, and I don't like that explanation. I think it's very watered down. I think that other characters like Rosalie and Jacob have a lot of really good, like, just actual people behind their actions, and they kind of don't. What Jacob does is just even worse, because Edward calls and he intentionally insinuates that Bella has died and lets everything that happens after happen. And it's not that I don't understand why he would do something like this, because I understand that he loves Bella and he's this close to securing her as his love interest for real. And Edward, of course, has to come and disrupt it. But that doesn't justify it. It's not excusable. He doesn't consult Bella. He doesn't explain what's going on to Bella. And you know what? If you were so certain that somebody loved you and was meant for you, then you would tell them, and you would find it in yourself to trust that they would choose you. And he knew that she wouldn't, which I think is should be his first sign that he's not gonna ever have her truly. Edward thinks that Bella's killed herself, so obviously it's his turn. Obviously. So this is when the story gets really action-based, and I really like it. Alice and Bella are on this mission. They're darting to Italy to save him and stop him from exposing himself and getting the Volturi to kill him. And you actually learn a lot about the Volturi during this part and how they work, and kind of what their laws vaguely are and what they desire, especially since, they deny killing Edward because they want him to join them. They want him on their team because he can read minds without touching them like Arrow can. And they also want Alice later on because she can see the future, which is a very useful trait. We kind of understand their motives and how they work, and I think that's really cool to get an idea of that. It's an epic ending. It takes the story out with a bang. However, this ending does not go without a fatal flaw. In fact, one of the most fatal flaws of the entire series, in my opinion, which is the way that Bella forgives Edward so easily. I feel like this is the bit that makes me give up on her sanity. Like, I was questioning it before, and now I'm just like, okay, this girl is off her rockers. She literally gives no care in the world about what Edward did to her, about the past 6 months of her miserable life. Like, she just doesn't care and is just like, yay, he's back. And that is toxic. That is extremely toxic, to show that something like that kind of behavior is somehow excusable. And it's not even close. And I don't like the idea that it's being represented as something that is excusable, because it's not. If somebody were to abandon you after putting you through all of that, it is not fair. It is not right. And it is not something that you can come back from so easily at all. And once again, what is the reasoning? I don't know. Magic love, supernatural love. I don't know. I fear that people have internalized that message. And obviously, I mean, this book is coming up on like 20 years old. It's a little too late to worry about people internalizing its message, because we already have. Quite literally is a younger girl dating an older man. And I know that he's a vampire. I know that technically he's 17, but really he's like 108 or however old he is. And it's not right. It's not. I just wish that there had been more of an explanation as to how this relationship is wrong, and how had there been more emphasis on, like, maybe this isn't right, maybe this isn't good. But there isn't. Their love is supposed to be like the most epic, amazing thing in the entire world. And I think maybe because it is supposed to defy logic, but I don't really know if I like that. I mean, I do like it in theory, but I feel like it's not explicitly stated that this is something that isn't real, that this is something that is completely fabricated by Edward's magical, sparkly charm, by the fact that he can read minds, but he can't read Bella's, by, just all of that. Like, if they had both just been regular humans, would any of this have happened? Would their relationship have occurred? Well, A, no, because Edward would be dead. B, because there is not that supernatural connection. I think that in almost any other scenario, Bella would either be dead, Edward would be dead, or Bella would be with Jacob. But once we get to this point, I mean, I don't really think that there's any chance of her choosing Jacob. And I feel like he is unable to give up on that. And in Eclipse, it just gets a lot worse. But yeah, I'm going to film my part talking about Eclipse and Breaking Dawn probably within the next few days. But this is just the first half. I hope you get everything that I've been trying to say. I don't think I'm the most articulate person in the entire world, but I'm trying, I promise. Okay. We're back. Yay. Today, I am wearing my last piece of Twilight merch, which I don't even know if you can see it. I'm wearing my Team Edward shirt. And my sister got me this shirt for my birthday, and so I decided to wear it. But I promise, this is all the Twilight, like this, and then like my 2 shirts. That's it. That's all I have. I'm not crazy. Okay, just a little. So we're moving on to Eclipse now, and then Breaking Dawn. I will reiterate, I've never read the illustrated guide, and I also have not read the Bree Tanner book. I know that she made a book about the whole Bree Tanner situation. I didn't read that one, so I don't really know the whole story behind that. I don't really even hear people talk about it that much though, so I don't know how integral it is to the story. But also I feel like there are so many more characters that she could have written a book about, but that's just my opinion. Okay, movie book comparison once again. I really don't like this movie very much, and obviously I watched the movies before I read the books, as most people do. And I never really liked the movie that much. I always felt like it was kind of boring, kind of like a filler movie. And I still stand by that because I think that's true. After reading the book, I realized just how much I liked the book more. So this is when the movies start to take a dive for me. The first two are like, I really like them. After that, not so much. And also, I don't think that the book is, a million times better either. It's just like, whatever. This takes place when Edward is back and Bella is finishing up high school and, trying to get back into being a normal human being and not, depressed over her vampire boyfriend abandoning her. And then also she is anxiously awaiting graduation because she told the Volturi that is when she would be turned and become a vampire. Because they're like, humans can't know about us, but now you have a human who knows everything. So y'all have to figure that out. And in this book, you can really tell how much Bella hates being a human. And I find it really weird how she's like convinced she was meant to be a vampire, because like, I don't think that makes any sense. And another thing to add on to that is she literally can think of no negatives of being a vampire. Like through the whole series, she literally only thinks about how amazing it will be. There's one negative that I noted, and it was that, I'll be really bloodthirsty, which means I won't be horny on my honeymoon. So me and Edward should definitely have sex before I'm turned. Problem solved. That's exactly what I wrote. And that's true. The only thing that she thinks about is like, well, I'm going to be really struggling with, wanting to kill people. And so I probably won't be super into my relationship. So I should probably have sex with a super strong, bloodthirsty vampire so that I'll enjoy it before I'm also do you see why I don't like that? Like, does that make sense? Are we comprehending why that's weird? Because like in the book, she's like, I won't be myself, but really she means I won't be turned on in the same way as I am now. That's what she means when she says that. But eventually they figure out that Victoria, who is still alive and still a problem, is making a newborn vampire army. Yes, she is. Because vampires are really strong and really crazy when they're first turned. It's like, pow. She's just really, really determined to kill Bella because she knows that Bella has all the vampires and all the werewolves on her side. So she's like, okay, I need to take this very seriously, and I need to create a whole little band of groupies to help me do this, because she's very determined to get revenge for what Edward did to James. This is the most interesting part of the book. I think that it was a really cool idea to make a vampire army thing happen. I think that it's cool, it's action-packed, it's creative, it's exciting, and it's a kind of a foreshadowing about what it's like to transition, and it makes us think about, what's going to happen to Bella when she transitions, when she is a newborn vampire. And so I think it does that without being too direct about it. It just gives us like an inkling about what it's like to become a vampire. We get more information on Jasper and Rosalie, which I love. I love learning about Jasper's past. I love learning about Rosalie's past. I don't like the emphasis on the love triangle as much in this book, which is definitely a huge undertone of the whole story. It's awkward, it's tense, and I don't really enjoy it as much. It makes me uncomfortable. And the thing about Jacob in this book is he really spends a lot of the time forcing himself on Bella and really trying to convince her that she's making the wrong choice. And whether or not the grand majority agrees with that, he goes about it in a really immature way. And I get it. I think that Jacob is very real. He is very, he's not emotionally mature. He's very human. That feels like the wrong way to describe him, but he's very emotional and impulsive. And so I feel like some of his actions do make sense, but also it sucks the way that he kind of treats her and will not respect her choice. It's just disrespectful and selfish. And okay, so while I was editing, I thought of something that I wish I had said in the video, but I didn't, which is that Jacob is really just hurting himself by continuously trying to get Bella to change her mind, because she keeps breaking his heart over and over again. She keeps rejecting him over and over again. And I just don't think he realizes that he's not going to be able to break that cycle, and he's not going to be able to get her to change her mind. And it sucks because he really, I think, is unaware of the like supernatural stronghold that Edward has Bella in, and how incapable he is to do anything about it. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Violently uncomfortable to witness. I didn't like it. And their kisses are so freaking bad. They are so bad. I cannot stand them. Reading them is even worse than watching them, because in the books, you can literally hear Bella thinking about how she's trying to push him away, but he's so strong that he can't even recognize that she's trying to push him away from her, and thinks that she is into it because he's that overpowering over her. And if that's not terrifying to you, then you're crazy, because it is so scary to read about her being overpowered like that and not being able to defend herself. And even afterwards, when she punches him, she breaks her hand because she has that little power.
My phone is buzzing like crazy. Come on. What is happening? Not much. Okay.
Do not disturb. Anyway, I do think that it sets a good example, because if somebody touches you or tries to kiss you or touch you without your consent, punch him in the face. I like that example, that idea. But I am glad that Bella stands her ground when she can. She's very, she's committed. She commits to Edward and she sticks to that. And it hurts her to hurt Jacob, but she knows what she wants. And so she does her best to stand by that. And I think that that's a good example that Bella sets. 'Cause really, I don't really think that she should choose either of them. I think that she should run away as fast as she can, but whatever, that's not an option here, clearly. And I also wrote in here something that I like. I said, I also appreciate Edward's respect for Bella and her choices, but also I think we should expect him to be a patient person. We should expect him to have that level of maturity and patience and understanding, because he's 100 and whatever years old. He has a lot of waiting to do as a person. I feel like that is something that should come as a given. Jacob is still a kid, and he has a lot of emotions and a lot of feelings, and he's very alive and young and impulsive, like I said earlier. And so I think being a werewolf makes that stronger. Sorry, I'm like using my notes. I'm relying on them heavily. I'm sorry. Being a werewolf, I think, increases all of that impulsiveness and emotion and like fire in him, which, makes his personality kind of opposite. While that is can explain some of his actions and feelings and choices, it doesn't mean that he shouldn't be held accountable, and it doesn't mean that it gets a pass. I just think that he needs more time to learn, like Edward's had. And I also think in this book there's a huge emphasis on Edward and Jacob and vampires and werewolves, and how different they are and how opposite they are. Not just in that way, but in physical and mental ways. I'm pretty sure there is a chapter in there called like Fire and Ice or something like that, because like vampires are ice cold, and werewolves run really, really warm. They're really hot for some reason. And so I think that that's really interesting, how she's like in love with two completely opposites. So some more stuff about like the love triangle and stuff during this. She agrees to marry Edward. And for some reason, Bella has a really extreme hatred and like kind of repulsion towards getting married. And she blames it on her mom and like her mother's lack of commitment. But I still think it's weird, especially since I feel like Stephenie Meyer is trying to make marriage seem like this really great, like gentlemanly, traditional thing. But then Bella is just like terrified of getting married. But she's like, fine, I'll get married to you as long as we have sex and then you turn me into a vampire. And he's like, okay, deal. Really weird. It's not a deal that I think is particularly lovely, but it's a deal that they make. And then they pretty much, I can't remember, does she graduate? I guess, yeah, she does graduate, I'm pretty sure, before the whole war thing, right? Also, speaking of vampires versus werewolves and like their opposites and stuff, I find the dramatic hatred for the werewolves that the vampires have is really out of line. I don't know if I talked about that in the New Moon part, but here it's really intense. They literally forcibly stop her from being able to see them because they think that the werewolves are so dangerous. Like they're just going to randomly turn into werewolves when they get too upset emotionally and then just kill her. And I don't really think that they're all that much more dangerous than somebody like Jasper or somebody like Edward. You know, I don't know. I don't really feel like it's that different. And I also just think it's really unfair that they hold back her free will. Like they literally hijack her truck so that she can't drive and then literally leaves Alice to babysit her while Edward goes hunting so that she can't leave, which is insane. Is it not? Like, I hate that. Clearly, the werewolves aren't that bad because she spent a good amount of time with them while Edward was running around away for 6 months. Like, I think she's going to be fine. I'm really struggling. Does I think Bella graduates before the whole army war thing, doesn't she? Just give me a second. So I skimmed through and made sure that I had the timeline right, and I did, so we're good. Yeah, the beginning of the book is just kind of life stuff, her being tossed around between her friends, family, Cullens, werewolves, the whole thing, and, well, actually, her friends kind of disappear at this point. Yeah, they don't really exist, which kind of sucks. Like, I wish that Stephenie Meyer hadn't really just kind of cut them out after New Moon. Like, obviously they're still in it, but they just not very much. And I feel like a lot of the things that Stephenie Meyer does is for convenience, which isn't always a bad thing, especially when you're making something with so many fantasy elements. Like, she designs how these supernatural creatures work, which means that she can, you know, do whatever she wants for the convenience of the plot. But what I don't like is the way that she changes, you know, the amount of time that she devotes to Charlie or Renee or any of her friends for the convenience of the plot, because I feel like she kind of tries to gloss over the fact that logically things that Bella does would hurt all of them so much. And I feel like Stephenie Meyer really dodges those things to avoid making it a problem when really it should be. So now I want to get into like the actual war part, because that is the most interesting by far. It's kind of horrible. So they have to hide Bella because the entire point of this army war thing is that Victoria's trying to kill Bella. So their solution is to like run around with her in the mountains and like spread her scent to distract or confuse all of these vampires who are trying to find her, and then hide her in the tippy top of the mountains while this like war is going down. They hide her in a mountain and it is freezing. And so she's hanging out with Edward and Jacob and Seth. We love Seth. And Bella is she ends up freezing cold. And so we all know the amazing moment where Jacob, being very warm temperatured, has to cuddle with her for warmth because she's freezing. And it is horrible. It's so awkward. And then Edward and Jacob think that she's asleep, and so they have this whole conversation about her and just assume that she can't hear it because she's sleeping. It's not true. Sadly, we don't even really get a whole lot of the actual action of the war because Bella is in the tent with Jacob and Edward. So that kind of sucks. Instead, we just get the awkward love triangle tension instead of, the actual battle that is occurring. It's really lame. After all that, Jacob finds out that they agreed to get married, and he gets really sad and runs away. And then Edward goes to find Jacob, and then he finds Jacob, and then they come back, and then they leave and let Jacob and Bella be alone to talk about things. And Jacob proceeds to threaten to sacrifice himself. It's really complicated, kind of. He's just kind of like, you're going to leave me anyway, so I might as well just go die in this war. Really messed up. And so she's like, no, don't kill yourself. And he's like, why not? And she's like, because don't kill yourself. And so she's like, I'll kiss you, because she knows that he's in love with her, and she's basically trying to think of anything that will make him stay. And he's like, kiss me? And she's like, sure. And then she does kiss him, and she realizes that she has been in love with him all this time, and she was just denying it to herself, and she kisses him, and it's like, but then he does go off to battle without a death wish, I guess, which I hate that, because we all know that coercing somebody is not consent. He specifically manipulated her and made threats in order to get her to do something romantic, specifically. So I really hated that. I felt like even though it was technically her idea, it also wasn't her idea, because he pretty much walked her right into it. So I know that Edward comes back and Seth is there, and then Victoria and her little guy, her little dude, her little minion that started all this. I can't remember his name. What is his name? Hold on. I'm looking it up really quick. Eclipse characters. Boom. Jacob, Edward, Carlisle, Esme, Seth, Riley. His name is Riley. So Victoria and Riley come along. And I don't remember quite how they found her, but somehow, some way, they're like, oh, here she is. Then there's the whole showdown. And Seth is kind of fighting Riley, and then Edward's kind of fighting Victoria, and Bella, the human, is just sitting there like, oh my god. And then there's also the whole other battle happening below them. Bella saves the day by sacrificing her own safety, cuts herself with a rock, which instantly distracts Victoria and Riley. I almost forgot his name again. So they instantly get distracted, and then Edward finishes them all off. And Seth is sad that he didn't get to kill Riley, but whatever. And then the thing below ends, and everybody's pretty much fine, except Jacob gets really hurt, but he ends up being fine too. But yeah, they're really lucky. The fact that, I know, once again, it's convenience for the plot, but the fact that none of them died during any of that is insane. Ooh, bless me. And then she also breaks Jacob's heart after kissing him and then being like, but we can't be together. And he's like, my life sucks. And she's like, my life sucks. And then she cries hysterically for an entire night. Cries super hard for an entire night. And Edward just watches. He's just sitting there watching her. And then afterwards, he's like, bro, are you good? So, oh my gosh, this paragraph I wrote is also good. It says,
I just hate watching Bella care so much about these super, super dangerous and so not worth it guys. They really have ruined her life, but she thinks they've somehow made it better, which obviously isn't true. And I mentioned how, like, sometimes when something or someone in your life is toxic, you try to convince yourself that it has somehow enhanced your life to, I think, kind of compensate for the pain that you're experiencing. But it's almost like you're trying to convince yourself that the pain you're feeling in the moment is worth it because they've made your overall life better, when that isn't true. And it's more just a way for you to try to escape the reality of your situation. And I feel like Bella does that. Breaks your heart. Breaks my heart, at least. And it's a message that I feel like this saga sends and isn't aware of. I think that this book is very much kind of a transitional book. And I think that's why I find it to be kind of boring, because it's just kind of like, okay, Victoria, James Laurent, they're all gone. They're good. Bella chooses Edward, even though we kind of already knew that she was going to do that this whole time. They're set to get married, and she's gonna become a vampire, and they're headed on to the next phase of their life. Oh, and also there's Bree Tanner, who the Volturi has absolutely zero compassion for, and they're just like, snap, dead, hate you. And I think it also gives you more of a look into just how heartless the Volturi is and how self-centered they are. Anything that will benefit them is the only thing that they care about. We get more insight onto how stupid they are. But yeah, that's really all that I feel like I have to say about Eclipse. Now it's time for Breaking Dawn. So, Breaking Dawn. Breaking Dawn is probably the book that is the most what the heck to me, because it's problematic in a lot of ways, but it's also just weird. And I really question Stephenie Meyer's train of thought when making some of these plot points and like what she thought she was doing, what her attempt was. Yeah, I just am curious as to how she thought some of these things were good ideas. But whatever. Okay, movie book comparison. I do not like the movies. They split them into 2 movies because the book is kind of big. And I hate these movies so much. I think for me, like, a lot of the things about movies is that they're supposed to be good in a sensory way, with your eyes, with your ears. And this movie is just not. I hate the outfits. I hate the wigs. I hate, like, a lot of, like, the makeup. And the baby is terrifying looking. It just doesn't do the book any justice. I don't feel like that it represents it in a satisfying way. Like, when it comes to the plot, they're okay. Especially the first movie is, like, fine when it comes to plot. Second movie, we'll get to it, but they're just ugly, okay? They are just ugly movies. I hate so much about them. So much. Visually. The soundtrack, not very memorable. I can't even remember any of the songs except for, like, I waited a minute. So, in the first part, Bella and Edward get married, and I've already talked about how unexcited she is for marriage, and it's really unfortunate because marriage is supposed to be a really good, really exciting, happy thing, but she's just doing it because it's a part of the deal, because she has to suffer through it to get what she really wants. And I also think it's really interesting because, like I said before, she blames it kind of on her mom and her mom's issues with commitment, but at the same time, isn't turning yourself into a vampire to be with a boy for the rest of eternity also kind of a pretty big commitment? Like, it's a little backwards, isn't it? It doesn't really make any sense to me, but whether any of that is on purpose or not, don't know. Bothers me either way. I also feel weird about this part because, like, the beginning of this book, because a lot of it is, like, really out of Bella's control, her entire experience. Like, Edward is, like, her truck kind of dies and he forces her to drive this fancy car that she doesn't want, and she expresses how much she hates fancy things and people who have a lot of money and everything. Like, that just isn't her, that isn't comfortable for her. And the Cullens are so extravagant and wealthy, and I feel like they force that kind of stuff on her, and that extends to the wedding because Alice pretty much plans the entire wedding for Bella and makes it this big, huge, extravagant event that she knows she wouldn't want it to be. And I feel like just makes it even worse for her, like an experience that she's already fearing even more uncomfortable. And that's terrible. I feel like they give her so little consideration, and they kind of treat her as like a pet or a toy, or, like just a fun little addition to their family, like a fun little game. And it's so weird. It's so toxic. It's so problematic. And I feel like it's not really displayed that way at all. And I mean, in Eclipse and Breaking Dawn, it's like that the whole time. Like, they just are constantly trying to control her and constantly trying to change her to be more like them and to fit in more with them. And I get, like, she is going to become a vampire and be a part of their family. So I don't know if they think that they're just like getting her used to them, but really I just think they're trying to change her in a way that is just unnecessary and is just kind of rude and mean in some circumstances. Like, I don't like it. And especially Alice specifically. Like, I love Alice, but the way that she treats Bella is very control freaky, and I don't appreciate that. Bella's dream in the book is a lot different than in the movie. In the movie, she's like standing at her wedding on a pile of all of her dead friends and family, which I guess maybe shows some of her fears about getting married and being a vampire. But in the book, those fears are kind of discussed beforehand, and then the dream actually does something very, very different for the plot. So in the beginning of Breaking Dawn, in the book, she learns about these vampire children. And so they're dangerous. The Volturi has kind of made them illegal and has killed every single one of them. And so Bella learns about this pretty early on. I don't remember specifically how she learns about them, but she does. And so she starts dreaming about trying to protect a little illegal vampire boy from being murdered. It's really just intense foreshadowing for what's going to happen later on. Yeah, I feel like her fears about marriage and being a vampire stuff could have been done in the movie in a different way. I actually think that the dream about the little boys is better, for sure. Then the actual wedding does happen, and it's pretty chill, except for this really awkward encounter where Jacob shows up, and she's really happy that he's there because she didn't think that he was going to come, because obviously he did not want them to be married, but he does come, and they're like talking and dancing, and they're happy for, like 2 seconds before she somehow admits that she is planning on doing the deed with Edward on their honeymoon. And Jacob loses his mind and freaks out because he understandably is distressed about how dangerous that is. And he throws a fit and has to leave because he might, turn into a werewolf and kill everyone. I don't know. And you know what? He was right, because then the honeymoon happens, and it's pretty horrible because the first time that they have sex, she is bruised everywhere. And in the movie, I feel like it was really downplayed because if you read the book, it is described much more intense. It describes worse injuries than the movie shows. And I think that it's because we're not supposed to be mad at Edward. We're not supposed to be, disturbed by their first time. We're supposed to agree with Bella and think that it was great. But it's not, because how on earth could it have been? How could the sex have been great if she wakes up that injured? How was she not in pain? How was she not actively being in pain? It's very romanticized. It's very unrealistic, and I really don't like that. However, I am glad that there's no smut in the books, because that would have been really weird to read, and I am really glad that we did not have to, sit through any of that. I really hope that there are no girls who are like, oh yeah, that's how sex is. That's normal. Like, no. And then she spends a little while whining about the fact that he won't do it again, even though it's completely understandable why he doesn't want to. But she pressures him, and eventually they do have sex a few more times, and then she's pregnant. And so she realizes, like, I missed a period, and I feel really weird. And she's pregnant. And she immediately assumes that her dreams from before were some kind of premonition, and she is going to have a little vampire baby boy. She thinks that it's going to be a little mini Edward baby. And I've seen a lot of people criticize the kind of pro-life messaging in this part, and I get it, and I get why that's upsetting to people, but I hate to say it, it is so on brand for Bella. Like, it makes sense for her character, and it makes sense for Rosalie's character, and so as much as I hate it, and as much as everybody else hates it, it sadly makes sense, and I don't like that. But, I mean, Bella spends so much of her time in this book just giving herself up, giving her safety and her well-being up for people that she loves and cares about, especially Edward. Edward above all else. In her entire life, Edward is at the tippy top of the list. And so when she imagines this little tiny baby Edward in her belly, she immediately feels that same amount of affection and dedication to him. And so I think it makes sense why she reacted the way she did. Not that I think that it's good. Yeah, she really transfers her feelings for Edward into this baby in this very protective way, where she is like, oh, okay, well, this baby is Edward baby, which means that it's more important than me. And then she literally wishes aggressively that the baby looks more like Edward than her. Like, she really, really hopes that it's an Edward baby. It's messed up. I don't like it. And if that doesn't tell you a lot about her personality, then, like, I don't know what will. And then the way that she has to excuse everything that's happening, why she's been gone for so long, you know, what's going on with her, the way that she has to lie to her dad and make her dad all concerned and scared, it's terrible. It is so sad, and it makes me so angry. It makes me so angry because he's so concerned and he loves her so much, and she's lying to him and dodging him. And it breaks my heart. It breaks my freaking heart. This entire midsection of the book is then written from Jacob's point of view, which I like for multiple reasons. I mean, just in general, I like books that are written from multiple points of view. It just makes the story a lot more interesting, dynamic, alive. We also get more of an insight on how the wolves work, how like a pack of wolves functions and how they think and how they work, which is awesome. So the pregnancy, horrible. The stuff of nightmares. Horror movie type stuff. So she's like dying and she's extremely sick. But drinking human blood seems to help. And she even thinks that it's so tasty. Also, the wolves want to kill the mystery baby as well. They're not happy about it. They are very scared of it. And everybody is, because nobody knows what's going to happen. You know, this is extremely rare for a human vampire baby creation to exist. So
that was one of the funniest scenes I've ever had to do in my life. It's like, really, we're all like 300-year-old geniuses, and we just go, it's like vampire baby, like on Google Images. Yeah, that was our research into it. It's like, I can't find anything.
They don't really know what to expect. And the wolves are just instantly like, okay, baby gotta die. And then Jacob splits from the pack because he's mad that they want to hurt Bella because Bella is carrying the baby. And then, like, I think it's Leah and Seth follow him. So we get to hear a lot about them. And I also feel really bad for Leah as a character because she's treated, everybody hates her, even though she absolutely deserves to feel the way that she feels about things, and she deserves to be able to express those feelings because she's been through a lot. And I feel like everybody acts like she's this obnoxious, whiny girl when, like, Jacob is probably more whiny than she could ever be. So also, dying Bella is insanely terrifying, and I know it's like, it's not supposed to be a pretty sight. It's not a sight for sore eyes. It's not meant to be, but I prefer reading it rather than actually needing to look at it. I guess it just really sucks because Bella is, in a way, choosing to inflict all this pain on everybody because everybody is hurting. Everybody is terrified. Everybody is stressed. And she's kind of just letting it happen. Not that we know what it would look like or mean to abort this kind of fetus. There's literally no way to know how that process would work. But it would probably be a more logical solution, but whatever. And I'm just going to ignore the part where Edward does offer to let Jacob have babies with Bella, or should I rephrase, he refers to them as puppies with Bella because he thinks that she just desires a child in general. But really, she desires the specific child because she thinks it is a mini replica of Edward, but I don't think he really realizes that. So the pregnancy is just really horrible, really painful, really, like I said, horror movie type stuff. Sucks. And then, so like childbirth kind of happens. She breaks her back, which is the worst scene I've ever seen in cinematic history. And then she dies during childbirth, which isn't shocking to me. Kind of saw it coming. And so Edward starts shooting her up with vampire venom, trying to like bring her back, or not. He just doesn't want her to be dead. He wants her to be just like vampire version of dead, not human version of dead. He literally bites her everywhere, stabs her everywhere, is like really trying very, very, very hard. But it's not really working, and he thinks it's a lost cause. And then I also feel like Rosalie confuses me during this part, because all of the stuff that she expresses about Bella not wanting her to be a vampire, wanting her to stay a human, wanting her to pick the right choice, but then also doesn't really care whether she lives or dies as a human. She just doesn't want her specifically to be a vampire, because she also has this weird connection with this baby, and I think it's because, you know, she wanted to be a human. She wanted to be able to have a family. So yeah, she's almost like living her human desires to be a parent via Bella, not really caring how Bella survives the experience. Like, she only cares about the baby. And so I feel like she kind of puts this weird claim over the baby and is like, mine. And so like the minute that the baby's born, she like swoops her up and is like taking her away, because yeah, it's a girl. But obviously Bella's not actually dead. She does become a vampire, and then decides to name her daughter Renesmee. It's a combination of Renee and Esme, Renee being her mother, Esme being Edward's, you know, like adoptive vampire mother. I'm sorry, there is no defending that name to me. I hate the name Renesmee, and I think 90% of everybody who's ever read the book also hates it. Not to mention that her boy name was EJ for Edward Jacob, which I guess is a little better. But also, why would you be bringing Jacob into this? Like, that feels weird. That feels uncomfortable. I don't like that. Anyway, I personally think that a really cute name for the baby would have been Meadow, because like her and Edward had like their little meadow moment. I think that would have been an adorable name, but whatever. Renesmee it is. And I do prefer to call her by other silly R words. Like, I don't know. I've heard her called all kinds of goofy names, but I'll just call her Renesmee so that people can like comprehend. So obviously Renesmee is super epic and grows super fast and is super smart and intelligent and basically fully developed at birth, so that conveniently Bella does not have to parent and neither does Edward, because it wouldn't be fun if they had to actually be responsible people and take care of a baby. Boring. Just pretty much Edward and Bella are not held accountable as parents at all, because they just want to like be vampires and be in love and like keep doing that kind of stuff, which is why Bella should not have had a baby in the first place. Well, she shouldn't have had the baby because it killed her, but she also shouldn't have had a baby because she clearly was not ready maturity wise. And now her baby is half human, and because her baby is half human and she's a newborn vampire, it's dangerous for her to be around the baby because she might want to eat the baby a little bit because it has some human seasoning, if you will. Okay, and then Jacob imprints on the baby. Worst, Stephenie Meyer, worst plot decision ever made. He imprints on the baby. And the thing about it is that this was foreshadowed in Eclipse, when I think it's Quinn who imprints on a 2-year-old, a human 2-year-old, too. So this baby doesn't even grow fast. I don't know if Stephenie Meyer thought that she was being clever when she came up with this plot idea. But it's just weird and gross, like insanely gross. And I feel like even if she was going to make this kind of plot line happen, where like you can imprint on a child, shouldn't it be more so that like, oh, if you imprint on a 2-year-old, okay, you're going to be like a brotherly figure or a fatherly figure as they grow up, and that's going to stay that way. Not like, oh, I'll be like a brotherly figure or just like a really good friend until she's old enough for me to date. Like, that is weird. Like, why can't it just stay as the original relationship? Because I don't like the fact that they just sit around waiting for them to be old enough to date. And that is exactly what they do. That is very much so explained in the book, that they're just waiting for the girl to be old enough. So I personally don't like the unplanned pregnancy trope in general, but this specifically is done in the worst way possible. This is everything bad about how that could be done. It's unbelievable. And then obviously Renesmee is like literally the most terrifying, creepy, ugly baby ever made in a film ever. I don't know what the goal was with that. I don't know what they thought I don't know how anybody saw that and was like, yeah, that looks really good. Let's put this into an official movie. Back to Bella becoming a vampire. So there's 3 main things. A, she has super epic, amazing, magical self-control and just decides that she just doesn't need to eat human blood if she doesn't want to because she's so special. Yeah, that annoys me. And it's obviously just because it's convenient for the plot to skip over that whole section of desiring human blood. And it annoys me because if you think about Rosalie is the only Cullen who has never even tasted human blood in her mouth. And yet Bella is like, just gets it as a magic extra little superpower, when Rosalie literally had to fight through it for that, which is insane. And then B, she is addicted to vampire sex with her boyfriend, or husband, sorry, Edward. Just, it's weird. I don't like it. And then C, she has a superpower, which is like her shielding power, which is why Edward could never read her mind, because it was just kind of a part of her. She has like a shield, and then it becomes her power when she turns into a vampire. And so she can shield herself and eventually others from the mental attacks of other vampires, which I think is pretty cool. Yeah, that's Vampire Bella in a nutshell. Once again, not a great parent. Can't even really be around her kid. But because of the super extra magical self-control, she can. She's also really mad when she finds out that Jacob imprinted on her daughter, which is like completely reasonable.
You imprinted on my daughter?
It wasn't my choice.
She's a baby!
It's not like that. It was her. From the beginning, it was Nessie who wanted me there.
Nessie? You nicknamed my daughter after the Loch Ness Monster?
One of the most reasonable reactions she's had thus far. He also claims that like the reason she wanted to be around him so much ever, and the reason that they were in love, is because of Renesmee, which doesn't make any sense, because it's not like Renesmee did not exist until the honeymoon. So like it doesn't go together. It doesn't match. So they just kind of start raising Renesmee like everything is fine, and they don't even question the fact that like she very much so resembles a little vampire child. And so when somebody sees this Renesmee character, I think it's Irina, I think is her name, that sees, and she reasonably assumes that Renesmee is one of these illegal baby creatures and reports them straight to the Volturi without talking to them first, which I think is interesting. And then, well, I think she doesn't like them anyway because the wolves killed Laurent. It's too much to go into. But so now they have to deal with the Volturi, and they know that they're going to come. And clearly we've already learned from like Bree Tanner that the Volturi they're not very sympathetic. They're not much for listening or thinking or using compassion. So they're pretty sure that the Volturi is just going to come and wipe Renesmee off the face of the earth. So they decide to gather every single vampire friend that they have to come and back them up. They're like, we're going to bring all of our friends. We're going to prove to them that this baby is not a vampire baby, but half vampire baby who grows and matures. And then we're gonna go up against the Volturi and we're gonna make them listen. So that's their plan. And then we get to meet all of these vampires from like all over the world, from all different time periods. It is so cool. It's literally some of the most interesting stuff that has happened in the entire series. And I wish that we got more information on a lot of them because they're really, really cool. They're like, okay, we'll back you up. So now they have like all of these vampires staying with them, preparing to tell the Volturi what's up. And they also help both Bella and Renesmee kind of fine-tune their superpowers, one could say. When the Volturi does show, they're pretty surprised by like the whole shebang. And the movie takes a wildly different turn than the books do. I mean, I think it's just to make it more interesting and more action-packed. In the movie, no. In the book, it's more like a really prolonged conversation with some tension because some of the Volturi members do try to attack, but Bella can shield a lot of them because she has her little shield power that she has been learning to extend to the people around her so she can protect people. There's not any kind of battle scene, and technically there's no battle scene in the movies either. It's just a vision of a battle scene, but you still get to see all of it as if it did happen. So like, whatever, there's no action portrayed in the books at all in any form. Really, it's just like Jane and Alec trying to attack all the vampires, but Bella blocks their attacks via shield power, which is pretty cool. So yeah, Alice shows Arrow what would happen if they did fight. But that doesn't happen in the book. It's much more tame, and they more just stand there and talk until they finally convince Arrow and everybody else that nothing bad is going to happen. Especially, they show that that there are actually quite a few versions of half human, half vampire people that exist that grow to maturity and then just kind of stop growing, and then they're just kind of like vampires, but a little bit more human-y. Like they're immortal, but they also can eat human food if they want. And I guess they've got some special powers and stuff. They're mostly vampire, but they can eat human food. That's about as human as they get. Like during the first part of their life, they grow, but then they just stop and they're pretty much just vampires past that point. It's just kind of happily ever after, I guess. I don't know. I didn't dislike the ending of the book, and I think I preferred the book version a lot more than the movie. I don't know why. I just think that like the movie was a little over the top and didn't really do the same kind of thing as the book did, but it doesn't really matter. I don't really feel like the ending of this book is as problematic. For me, the problematic stuff in Breaking Dawn really comes from this like weird family dynamic, especially when Jacob decides to just show Charlie his transformation and then be like, Bella's not what I am, but she's something weird, and like, you don't want to know. And then Charlie's just like, yeah, I don't want to know. I thought that was weird. So like her relationship with like Charlie and Renee is weird, and then Jacob's imprinting thing on Renesmee is weird, and then Bella and Edward as parents is weird, and the Cullens and the Wolves kind of being friends but kind of not being friends is weird. It's just everything is weird about this family, and I know that that's like whatever. End of the book, I guess that they're happy, and Bella can actually finds out that she can put down her shield and show Edward things. She can show him like memories and stuff, and it's like cute, and I actually like the way that it was shown in the movie. I think that it's a pretty little vision, but that's kind of all I have to say. I mean, obviously there's a lot that I didn't touch on, but I tried to bring up what I felt to be the most important parts of the plot and the things that I thought were kind of messed up and kind of backwards, because there's a lot of things that happen that just are not good representations of how we should live and how we should think about our relationships with other people and how we should think about ourselves and the way we should treat ourselves and others. The reason that I still enjoy Twilight to the level that I do is because I can comprehend and recognize these things, and I can enjoy the series from a very innocent point of view, because I know that none of these things are accurate. None of them are applicable to my life. And so it's my ability to separate these characters and the way they think and the way they act from myself. But I feel like when you're a young, impressionable person, like, things like this affect you. The things that a lot of kids read before they're in their first actual relationship, before they've lived a whole lot of life. Like, a lot of people read this series or watch the movies when they're really young. They get really obsessed with it, and they start to feel like the characters and their lives and their experiences start to kind of appeal to them, and they want to have an experience like that. I know it might seem crazy to somebody who's matured and reasonable, but when you're young and impressionable, it might be something that you're interested in. It's not good to represent really bad things as not bad, because I think that it is perfectly fine for a story to have characters who are not good characters, to have main characters who do bad things and make bad decisions. I think that a book, though, and a story in general, has to be self-aware. When characters are flawed, when characters do bad things, it needs to be recognized that, oh, this isn't great. And I think that Twilight does not do that at all, and actually is kind of backwards in the way that it represents a lot of decisions and mindsets. And I also think that that might come from just the way that Stephenie Meyer views the world, and that sucks. But also, if you want to see the rest of my trinkets, I have an Edward sticker also given to me by my sister, and a pin. I don't know why everything that I have is Edward themed. It's really not intentional, because I don't even really consider myself Team Edward or Team Jacob, but for some reason everything I have is Edward themed, including this super awesome shirt. So yeah, that's the way that I view it. Like I said, obviously there's a lot I didn't touch on. There's so many things that could be discussed. It's a very big saga. There's a lot of details, and I just covered, I think, very, very main, basic chunks of the plot. But there are all kinds of people who have made much better, much more deeply rooted analysis of this story. And there are also a few people on TikTok who do like question answers. Here are my two favorite ones who I watch all the time, who talk about very specific details of the plot. So yeah, definitely check them out. And I hope that this wasn't horribly boring or confusing, and I hope everything that I said made sense and was reasonable, and I hope that this helps somebody, learn how to criticize and fully comprehend a series for good and bad, and not just like Bella loves Edward, and not just blindly accepting the series for what it is and just not questioning or critiquing it at all, like Bella does with Edward. Don't do that. That's, it's good to be critical. It's good to use your mind. It's good to think. And if something doesn't sit right with you, that's fine. And you should think about that. And you should think about why it doesn't sit right with you. And that doesn't mean you have to decide that you hate the series and that it's a horrible thing. But it means that you can separate what you saw or what you read from how you will actually live your life. So yeah, I don't know if any of this makes sense. Thank you for watching this. I know that it was long and stupid. No, I know that it was long, but I don't think it was stupid. Maybe a little, but whatever. Bye.